We think we know them. The faces flickering on the silver screen, larger than life, icons of an era we call golden. The dreamweavers, the matinee idols, the stars. Through the darkest nights of the Great Depression and World War II, they gave us romance, heroism, glamour. But what happens when the lights go down and the cameras stop rolling? Behind the carefully constructed facades, behind the studio-polished smiles, lay a world of secrets. A darkness the Klieg lights could not erase. This wasn't a fairy tale kingdom. It was a jungle where survival had a price. Studio moguls demanding perfection at any cost. For every dazzling premiere, every Oscar win, there was exploitation, scandal, heartbreak. The very people we invited into our homes and hearts were living lives far more dramatic, and often more tragic, than any script they were ever handed. Tonight we're pulling back the velvet curtain on stories you were never meant to hear, headlines that were buried, truths that were silenced, swashbuckling heroes with sinister appetites, comedic geniuses with a taste for the forbidden, more shocking, more complex, more human than you could ever imagine. Errol Flynn, a dashing swordsman, a rogue with a twinkle in his eye, leaping from ship-rigging with a saber in hand. Robin Hood, Captain Blood, Don Juan. He was the embodiment of masculine charm and heroic bravado. Warner Brothers sold this image relentlessly, but the line between charming rogue and something predatory was thin. I like my whiskey old and my women young. Parties aboard his yacht the Zaka whispered about in hushed, envious tones. The glamour hid a grimy reality. In 1942 the whispers became a courtroom. The charge, statutory rape, Betty Hansen, Peggy Satterley. The world was stunned. The trial was a media circus. Flynn played the unjustly accused man. He arrived at court looking impeccable, smiled for cameras, signed autographs for swooning fans. Defense lawyers attacked the girls' reputations. Prosecution painted Flynn as a predator. The studio defended its investment. Public opinion sided with Flynn. Verdict, not guilty. Flynn wept. Fans cheered. He walked free. His image survived for many. Hansen and Satterley were ruined. Labeled liars, they faded away. Collateral damage of protecting a myth. Rumors persisted. In Like Flynn entered popular speech. Before there was Chaplin, before Keaton, there was Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. In the silent film era, he was a king. A comedic giant. In stature and in box office appeal. One of the highest paid stars, a director of his own films, mentor to Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, on-screen persona, lovable, clumsy, surprisingly agile. Audiences adored him. In 1921 he was at the absolute zenith of his career, having just signed an unprecedented multi-million-dollar contract with Paramount Pictures. To celebrate, he drove up to San Francisco for a Labor Day weekend party at the St. Francis Hotel. The party raged for 3 days. It was a haze of illegal Prohibition-era booze and a rotating cast of guests. Among them was a young, aspiring actress named Virginia Rappe. What exactly happened in that hotel suite on September 5, 1921, has been debated for a century, but the known facts are these. At some point during the party, Virginia Rappe became gravely ill. Arbuckle, finding her in pain in his bedroom, carried her to another room and summoned the hotel doctor. 4 days later, Virginia Rappe was dead. The cause of death was a ruptured bladder and peritonitis, but a so-called friend of Rappe's, Maud Delmont, went to the police with a sensational story. She claimed Arbuckle had brutally assaulted Virginia Rappe, his immense weight causing the fatal internal injuries. The story was explosive, a perfect cocktail of celebrity, sex, booze, and death. William Randolph Hearst saw the opportunity immediately. His papers went on the attack. The lovable clown was transformed overnight into a lecherous beast. Headlines screamed with lurid, fabricated details. The public outcry was swift and ferocious. Morality groups seized the scandal as proof of Hollywood's depravity. Theaters pulled his movies from screens. Roscoe Arbuckle was tried and convicted in the press long before he set foot in a courtroom. He would face 3 trials for manslaughter. Trial 1, hung jury, 10 jurors for acquittal. Trial 3 in 1922 was different. Defense medical experts testified Virginia Rappe suffered chronic cystitis aggravated by alcohol. They argued there was no evidence of assault. After only 6 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned not guilty. The jury foreman read a formal apology. Acquittal is not enough. It was a total, unequivocal exoneration, but it was too late. The laughter had died. The court cleared his name, but public opinion had already passed sentence. Studios scrambled to clean up Hollywood's image. They formed the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America and hired Will H. Hayes. Roscoe Arbuckle was effectively blacklisted. He lost his fortune, his mansion, his career. He tried to direct under the pseudonym William B. Goodrich. In 1933, Warner Brothers signed him to star in a feature. On the night he signed the contract, he reportedly said, "This is the best day of my life." He went to sleep that night and died of a heart attack. He was 46 years old. Judy Garland, Frances Gumm from Grand Rapids, Minnesota. A voice that could break your heart and mend it all at once. When she sang Over the Rainbow in The Wizard of Oz, she wasn't just a character, she was the embodiment of every person who ever dreamed of a better, more colorful world. She was America's sweetheart, the girl next door with the once-in-a-generation talent. But the yellow brick road was paved with exploitation, and the Emerald City was a facade built by a tyrannical wizard named Louis B. Mayer. Her journey began when she was just a child, part of the vaudeville act The Gumm Sisters. She was discovered by MGM, signed to a contract at 13. From that moment on, she was no longer Frances Gumm. She was Judy Garland, molded, managed, monetized. Her childhood was over. The studio became her parent, her school, and her prison. Louis B. Mayer saw her as an asset. A little hunchback, he called her. They controlled what she ate, what she wore, who she dated, even how much she slept. She was put on a strict diet, black coffee, chicken soup, up to 80 cigarettes a day. The grueling work schedule was inhuman. To keep her working, studio doctors prescribed amphetamines, pep pills. Then, to get her to sleep at night, they gave her barbiturates, sleeping pills. This medically administered addiction began when she was a teenager. It was a chemical cage. She was constantly told she wasn't pretty enough. She was fitted with rubber caps for her teeth, special inserts to reshape her nose. On the set of The Wizard of Oz, a children's fantasy on screen, she was living a nightmare. She was 16, forced to bind her chest and constantly berated about her weight. The beloved Munchkins were rumored to have harassed her relentlessly. Her childhood was being systematically destroyed to create timeless cinema. This cycle, uppers, downers, constant criticism, relentless work. The studio had created a dependency, psychological and physiological. Her co-star, Mickey Rooney, another child star trapped in the same system. They were children treated like miniature adults, their health sacrificed for box office receipts. As she grew older, the pressure intensified. She was a massive star. Meet me in St. Louis, Easter Parade. But she was deeply unhappy and insecure. The drugs, the diets, the lack of control over her own life. It all took a devastating toll. She developed a reputation for being difficult. She would show up late to set or not at all. She suffered from nervous breakdowns. The studio, instead of seeing a young woman in crisis, saw an unreliable employee. In 1950, after 15 years, MGM fired her. She was 28, a washed-up star with a severe drug problem, multiple suicide attempts, and mountains of debt. The system that had built her up had now cast her out. The family she had only ever known had abandoned her. She was left to pick up the pieces of a life that was never really hers to begin with. But Judy was a survivor. She reinvented herself. She staged a legendary comeback. London Palladium, New York's Palace Theater. Her performance in A Star is Born, 1954, earned an Academy Award nomination. In that role, she poured all her pain into Vicki Lester. The film's famous line about flattening her nose and capping her teeth. It was chillingly autobiographical. The film was a triumph, but the demons were never far behind. Her struggles continued. Substance abuse, financial instability, tumultuous relationships. The damage done in her youth was too profound. She died in 1969 from an accidental overdose of barbiturates. She was just 47 years old. The coroner noted there was no evidence she intended to take her own life. It was simply that a body ravaged by a lifetime of prescribed drug abuse finally gave out. The little girl with the big voice, who dreamed of a place where troubles melt like lemon drops, was gone. Her story is the ultimate Hollywood tragedy. It's a story of corporate greed and the exploitation of a child. Judy Garland gave the world her voice, her heart, her soul. In return, Hollywood took her childhood, her health, and ultimately, her life. Charlie Chaplin, the little tramp. Arguably the most famous person on the planet for a time. With his bowler hat, cane, waddling walk, he was a universal symbol of the underdog. A comedic genius who could evoke laughter and pathos without saying a single word. He was more than a movie star. He was a global icon, a filmmaker who controlled every aspect of his art. He was a master of his craft, a titan of the silent era. But the man behind the tramp was far more complicated and far more controversial than his on-screen persona suggested. While the tramp was a figure of sweet-natured innocence, Charlie Chaplin, the man, had a well-documented and deeply troubling preference for extremely young women. His personal life was a string of relationships and marriages with teenage girls, a pattern that began early in his career and continued for decades, casting a dark shadow over his artistic legacy. His first wife, Mildred Harris, was 16 when he married her in 1918. He was 29. The marriage was brief and unhappy. His second wife, Lita Gray, was also 16 when they wed in 1924. He was 35. She had been cast in his film The Gold Rush when she was just 15. She became pregnant, and Chaplin, fearing a statutory rape charge and a career-ending scandal, married her in secret. This was not a romance. It was damage control. The divorce from Lita Gray was one of the most sensational scandals of the 1920s. Her divorce complaint, a 42-page document, was leaked to the press and became a bestseller. It was filled with lurid accusations, painting Chaplin as a cruel, manipulative man with perverted sexual desires. It detailed his affairs and his obsession with young girls. The public was shocked. The man who played the gentle tramp was being accused of being a moral monster. The scandal threatened to destroy him. Morality groups called for his films to be banned. The Lita Gray affair cemented a reputation that would follow him for the rest of his life. While he survived it professionally, the perception of him had changed. The innocence of the tramp now seemed like a mask, hiding a much darker and more predatory nature. He was a genius, yes, but a deeply flawed one. His controversies didn't end there. In the 1940s, he became embroiled in another legal and public relations nightmare. A young actress named Joan Barry filed a paternity suit against him, claiming he was the father of her child. The affair was messy and public. Barry, who suffered from mental health issues, was portrayed as unstable, but the story captivated the nation. Chaplin was once again on trial, his personal life laid bare for public consumption. Blood tests proved conclusively that Chaplin was not the father of Barry's child. In any rational world, that should have been the end of it. But this was Hollywood, and Chaplin was a lightning rod for controversy. In a bizarre and unjust verdict, the California court ordered him to pay child support until the child turned 21. It was a legal absurdity, but it further damaged his public image. At the same time, Chaplin was facing political persecution. His films, which often satirized authority and championed the poor, were seen by some as anti-capitalist propaganda. His final American film, Monsieur Verdoux, was met with boos and protests at its premiere. He was accused of being a communist sympathizer. The FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover, had been compiling a massive file on Chaplin for years, searching for any reason to deport the British-born star. They saw him as a moral and political subversive. His romantic history, his paternity suit, his perceived leftist politics, it all combined to create a perfect storm of controversy. The little tramp had become a big target. The final blow came in 1952. While sailing to London for the premiere of his film Limelight, Chaplin was informed that his re-entry permit had been revoked. He would not be allowed back unless he submitted to an inquiry into his political beliefs and moral character. Chaplin, disgusted and hurt, refused. He would not return to America for 20 years. He settled in Switzerland with his fourth wife, Una O'Neill, whom he had married when she was 18 and he was 54. He had finally found a lasting relationship, but the pattern of his attractions remained unbroken. From his exile, he watched as his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame was repeatedly vandalized. The country that had made him the world's biggest star had turned its back on him. He did return, one last time in 1972, to accept an honorary Academy Award. He received a 12-minute standing ovation, the longest in Oscar history. It was a moment of reconciliation, a prodigal son's return, but it couldn't erase the decades of scandal, the troubling personal choices, or the political persecution. The applause was for the tramp, the beloved icon on the screen. The story of Charlie Chaplin forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. Can we separate the art from the artist? Can we celebrate the genius of the filmmaker while acknowledging the deeply problematic behavior of the man? His legacy is a paradox. The tramp may have been silent, but the controversies surrounding his creator still speak volumes. The Golden Age. It sounds so pristine, so perfect. But as we've seen, the gold was often just a thin veneer, hiding a rot of exploitation, corruption, human suffering. Errol Flynn, Fatty Arbuckle, Judy Garland, Charlie Chaplin. Fame was not a dream come true, but a deal with the devil. They traded immense talent, wealth, adoration for their privacy, autonomy, their very soul. The studio system controlled them, it used them. When no longer useful, it discarded them. These are not just gossip from a bygone era, they are cautionary tales about the nature of power and the corrosive effect of fame. They were hero and villain, victim and perpetrator. The scandals weren't bugs. They were features of a machine designed to create perfection on screen through chaos off it. Beautiful fantasies manufactured in a factory of broken hearts and shattered lives, a truth hidden just outside the frame. These are the stories that Hollywood would rather forget. But in these dark corners, in these untold histories, we find a more complete, more honest picture of the world that created the movies we love. The glamour is undeniable, the darkness is unforgettable. What do you think? Were these stars victims of their time, or architects of their own demise? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to uncover more secrets from Hollywood's hidden history, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell.